spreads pro-Hamas propaganda while organizing anti-Israel protests at Columbia University be allowed to stay in our country? That's the real question tonight. And it all stems from this guy, Mahmoud Khalil. He's a Palestinian refugee who was born in Syria. He's in the U.S. on a green card. He completed his master's degree in December, but as of Saturday was living in an on-campus apartment with his wife, who is a U.S. citizen and is also 8 months pregnant with their first child. Immigration agents took Khalil into custody and plans to deport him, but a federal judge has put that on pause, at least for now. The White House standing firm tonight. They say Khalil is a national security threat by aligning himself with Hamas. And because of that, they have every right to revoke his green card. In fact, Lindsay asked White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt about this case in today's White House press briefing. Listen here.
Mahmoud Khalil was an individual who was given the privilege of coming to this country to study at one of our nation's finest universities and colleges. And he took advantage of that opportunity, of that privilege, by siding with terrorists.
The president has said this is the first of many arrests like this. Does the administration have a rough estimate of how many arrests you're planning to make similar?
I don't have an estimate. I do know that DHS, based on very good intel that they have gathered at the direction of the president's executive order, which made it very clear to the Department of Homeland Security that engaging, as I said, in anti-American, anti-Semitic, pro-Hamas protests will not be tolerated. So since the president signed that executive order and since Secretary of Known has taken the oath at DHS, they have been using intelligence to identify individuals on our nation's colleges and universities, on our college campuses, who have engaged in such behavior and activity, and especially illegal activity.
Khalil is now being held in a detention facility in the state of Louisiana as protesters take to the streets in New York demanding his release. A lawful permanent resident or a green card holder is just that. They are a legal immigrant here in the United States. There are roughly 12.7 million of them here right now. It's their last immigration step before they can become a citizen. They have similar rights to American citizens, but they can't vote. And a small number of them can and do get deported, but typically it would take a pretty high legal bar for that to happen. So let's discuss this now with immigration attorney Deron Smallcomb. Welcome you back into the broadcast, friend of the show. Thank you for being here, Deron. All right, so give us an example of two of why someone would actually have their green card revoked.
Well, traditionally, it's usually going to be for fraud on the application, or they've been arrested for something else. So we've seen people get arrested for a serious crime. They serve their time in prison. When they're released, ICE will pick them up and then put them in the deportation process, even though they previously had a green card. So that's typical.
This is an interesting case, is it not?
Oh, it is different. Yeah, for sure. We haven't seen one like this for a while.
But have we heard about this in the past?
Not recently, certainly.
Okay. What's the line here? Because Khalil's supporters will say, hey, he has a First Amendment right to go out and protest and to raise his concerns, right? Is that factual, or does a green card holder not have the same rights that you and I do to protest?
They're not quite the same. The Supreme Court has put some limitations on the rights of green card holders, but even you and I don't have a blanket right to do whatever we want. If we were to go downtown right now and incite a bunch of people to go overthrow the mayor with violence, then that's a limitation on our free speech. Then we would be arrested for that, even as U.S. citizens.
I think that's the point that a lot of people may not understand is, have you seen what's happened at Columbia University?
Yeah, it's a disaster.
Right?
It's a disaster.
I mean, the school buildings are being taken over in some cases. There have been windows broken. There are Jewish students who've been harassed and they're afraid to go to class. So to your point, we as American citizens, we have this right to free speech, but not to invoke violence, right?
Correct. It's not an absolute right. So violence is definitely something that would not be covered within the First Amendment. And when it comes to green card holders, it's even more restrictive. So for example, there's two sets of authorities here. First, you have the Secretary of State and the Immigration and Nationality Act, right? So if you say something is a green card holder, which is adverse to our foreign interests, for example, or a threat to national security in some way, or aligned with a terrorist organization, the Secretary of State can designate you for removal from the United States. It doesn't have to be a criminal event. You don't have to be convicted of doing something wrong, but it has to be reasonable grounds to make that removal. And so I'm guessing, being that they've started here with a green card holder rather than a visa holder, which is a much higher threshold, presumably they have strong evidence of Khalil's involvement with the Hamas terrorist group.
So how does this end, in your opinion? Where do you see this going, and how does it end?
Well, there's two steps. The first step is they're going to look at the arrest tomorrow. And that's going to be a federal process, but it doesn't really have an impact on the big picture. So everybody's putting out tomorrow like, oh, everything gets settled tomorrow. No, it doesn't. They will decide whether the arrest was lawful or not. That's one thing. But the United States can still put removal proceedings on him. So maybe he won't be detained during the removal proceedings, but they will still serve him with what they call a notice to appear. And they're going to say, because of this, this, and this, you're going to be removed from the United States. Here's your day in court. It's at this place and at this time, show up and you have a chance to defend yourself. And in that case, you would go in there, and if you had clear and convincing evidence as to why you haven't committed these actions, then you would be not removed from the United States, for example. If you did commit those actions, then you could ask the court for relief, saying, okay, if you sent me back, though, I would be killed for some reason. And so they may not remove you, but they may remove your green card.
Gotcha. Well, still a lot more to unpack. Deron, always great to see you. Thank you for being here.
Chris.
You got it. Meanwhile, Customs and Border Protection has relaunched its immigration app. It's been rebranded as CBP Home and now guides people on how to self-deport. So if you're here illegally, you can voluntarily leave. And in doing so, you can avoid penalties and potentially come back and re-enter our country legally. We'll be right back with more news right after this.